The flyer in my hands is a mirror, my childhood face staring back from a 1998 missing child report. My birth certificate is a forgery. The private investigator just kicked in my front door, and I'm holding a brass lamp like it's my only chance. If I don't get to that safe deposit box key hidden behind the flyer, the life I knew burns with it. My blood type doesn't match my parents'. The baby book in my hands proves it. And the man breaking through my house isn't here to ask questions. Dust motes danced in the shafts of autumn light, piercing the Crestview Library's clear-story windows. Maya Sterling eased a heavy, leather-bound archive onto the scarred oak table, the scent of vanilla and decay rising from the yellowed pages. Her fingertips traced the embossed spine of the 1998 local gazette, snagging on a loose thread. Silence pressed against her ears, broken only by the rhythmic thrum of the overhead fan and the distant, muffled cough of a teenager in the stacks. She flipped through grainy photographs of high school football victories and ribbon-cutting ceremonies at the now-defunct textile mill. A loose sheet of paper slid from the binding, fluttering toward the carpet. Maya caught it mid-air. The flyer was printed on cheap neon green cardstock, faded now to a sickly lime. Chloe Vance stared out from a Polaroid, her smile crooked, a smear of strawberry jam on her chin. "Missing," the bold letters shouted, though the ink had bled into the fibers over 25 years of neglect. Maya's thumb brushed the girl's frozen face. The paper felt brittle, ready to disintegrate under the slightest pressure. A sharp chill prickled her skin despite the stuffy room. She scanned the contact information at the bottom, recognizing a phone number she dialed every Sunday morning. Her breath hitched. The digits belonged to her father's private office line, a detail absent from every official recount of the town's darkest year. She folded the flyer, the crisp snap of the paper echoing like a gunshot in the vaulted room, and tucked it deep into her satchel. Outside, the wind rattled the window panes, signaling a storm. The library's heavy oak doors groaned as Maya pushed her way out into the biting Oregon air. The discovery of the flyer hummed in her pocket like a live wire, a physical weight that made her gait uneven. She reached into her coat, her thumb finding the jagged sea glass she always carried. Scritch, scritch. The sharp edge bit into her skin, grounding her as the world began to tilt. She needed to see her own history, to compare the crooked smile of Chloe Vance with the glossy, curated portraits that lined the hallway of the Sterling estate. By the time she reached her apartment, the sky had bruised into a deep, stormy purple. She didn't turn on the lights. Instead, she sat on the floor of her home office, the glow of her laptop screen the only illumination. Her fingers flew across the keys, bypassing the surface-level search results to dive into the digitized Chicago archives. She pulled up her own birth certificate, a document she had scanned months ago for a passport application. She looked at the seal, the way the ink sat on the digital page. To any other eye, it was official. But Maya had spent years working in high-end document restoration. She saw the glitch. The spacing between the letters of the county clerk's name was off by a fraction of a millimeter. It wasn't a mistake of the era. It was the mark of a high-end printer that didn't exist in 1998. The realization made her stomach churn, a cold, oily sensation. Her entire identity, the very foundation of Maya Sterling, was a construction of paper and ink. She grabbed her phone, her pulse thumping against her eardrums like a heavy drum. She needed Mark. Mark, with his heavy ring of keys and his stubborn refusal to let a problem go unsolved. "Mark," she whispered when he picked up, her voice sounding thin and brittle in the dark room. "I need you. I found something. The math. The math doesn't square." Mark Miller arrived 20 minutes later. The janitor jingle of his 30 keys, announcing his presence before he even reached the door. He didn't ask questions. He saw the way Maya was huddled on the floor, her thumb moving rhythmically in her pocket, and he immediately went to the kitchen to put on a pot of coffee. The smell of bitter beans began to cut through the stale air of the office. "Give it to me straight, Maya," Mark said, leaning against the doorframe. He looked at the screen, then at the neon green flyer resting on the desk. "You're vibrating like a loose wire. What are we looking at?" Maya explained the forgery, her voice gaining a clinical, detached edge as she pointed out the microscopic errors in the birth certificate. "I need to track the origin of this document, Mark. If it's fake, then the Sterlings aren't just my parents. I don't know what they are. We have to do this now, before they get back from the coast on Sunday." Mark nodded, his jaw tightening. "The law is a heavy hammer, Maya. If we start swinging it, things are going to break. You sure you're ready for the debris?" "I'm already broken, Mark. I just want to know why." Mark pulled out his phone, his fingers moving with practiced efficiency. "I've got a buddy in the clerk's office in Chicago. If I send him the scan, he can cross-reference the serial number. It'll leave a trail, though. A digital footprint that someone might notice if they're looking." "Do it," Maya said. "I can't live in the fog anymore." Mark hit send, the soft whoosh of the outgoing email sounding like a finality. He reached out and squeezed Maya's shoulder, his hand warm and heavy. "The play is in motion. We just have to wait for the ping." But the ping didn't come from the computer. It came from the shadows of the hallway. A floorboard groaned, a sound Maya knew shouldn't happen unless someone was standing right outside the office door. She froze, her hand clenching the sea glass so hard the point drew blood. Mark's eyes went wide, his hand instinctively going to the heavy ring of keys in his pocket. The door didn't just open, it was kicked. A man, dressed in a nondescript gray hoodie, lunged into the room. He wasn't a ghost. He was a solid, breathing threat, the smell of wet wool and cheap cigarettes trailing behind him. He didn't go for Maya. He went for the desk, his hand reaching for the neon green flyer and the laptop. "Hey!" Mark shouted, stepping forward to intercept. The intruder was faster, swinging a heavy, leather-wrapped fist that caught Mark across the jaw. Mark went down, the jingle of his keys echoing as he hit the hardwood. Maya didn't think. She didn't have time for a verification loop. Her hand found the heavy brass lamp on the side table. It was a solid piece of metal, cold and unforgiving. As the man reached for her laptop, Maya swung. The lamp connected with the side of the man's head, with a sickening thud, like a bat hitting a wet rug. The intruder stumbled, a low groan escaping his throat. He looked at Maya, his eyes glassy and unfocused, blood beginning to leak from his hairline. He didn't try to fight back. Instead, he scrambled toward the open window, disappearing into the rainy night before Maya could swing again. The room fell into a terrifying silence, broken only by Mark's ragged breathing as he pushed himself up from the floor. "You okay?" Mark wheezed, rubbing his jaw. Maya didn't answer. She was looking at the flyer. It was crumpled, stained with a drop of the intruder's blood. The man hadn't been a common thief. He hadn't looked at her jewelry or her wallet. He had wanted the evidence. "He was sent," Maya whispered, her voice trembling. "Someone knows I'm looking." She turned the flyer over, her fingers trembling. As she smoothed out the paper, she felt a small, hard lump taped to the back of the cardstock. She peeled back a layer of ancient Scotch tape, and a small silver key fell onto the desk. It was engraved with a number, 402, and the logo of First National Bank. A safe deposit box, Mark said, his voice low. Your parents, they didn't just hide the flyer. They hid the source. The next morning, the First National Bank felt like a tomb. The air was sterile, chilled by an air conditioning system that hummed at a frequency that made Maya's head throb. She stood before the vault, the silver key gripped in her palm. The bank teller, a woman with a smile as fixed and artificial as a doll's, led her into the private viewing room. The heavy steel door of the vault groaned open, and the teller slid out, Box 402. Maya's heart was a frantic bird in her chest. She waited until the teller left, then lifted the lid. Inside wasn't gold or jewelry. It was a small, hand-bound baby book with a quilted cover. Maya opened it. The first page showed a lock of blonde hair taped to the paper. Below it, in neat, military-grade handwriting, her father's handwriting, were the medical stats of a newborn. Name: Maya Sterling. Date of birth: October 14th, 1998. Blood type: O negative. Maya felt the air leave the room. She reached into her bag and pulled out a medical report from her own doctor, a routine checkup from last year. She looked at the blood type on the lab results. O negative. Then she pulled up the digital files she'd stolen from her father's private medical records. David Sterling, A positive. Jennifer Sterling, A positive. The math didn't square. It was a biological impossibility. Two parents with type A blood could never, under any law of nature, produce a child with type O. The room began to spin. The white marble floors looked like ice, ready to crack and swallow her whole. She wasn't their miracle. She wasn't their daughter. She was a stolen thing, kept in a gilded cage and told she was loved. The drive back to the Sterling estate felt like a descent into a fever dream. The rain had turned into a steady, gray drizzle that blurred the world. As Maya pulled into the long, winding driveway, she saw something that made her blood turn to ice. A black SUV sat in the circle drive. Her parents were home, 3 days early. She tried to turn the car around, but the heavy iron gates at the end of the driveway began to swing shut. The sound of the metal bolt sliding into place echoed through the woods like a guillotine blade. Maya stepped out of the car, her legs feeling like lead. David Sterling was standing on the front porch, his silver hair perfectly coiffed, his posture as rigid as a soldier's. He was checking his watch. Shirt tag number 4, a Thursday. The world was in its orbit, according to his sequence. "You're home early, Maya," David said, his voice smooth and devoid of warmth. "We missed you at the coast." Jennifer Sterling appeared behind him, her eyes watery and red-rimmed. She was humming "Happy Birthday" under her breath, her hands moving in a rhythmic washing motion. "We were worried, dear," Jennifer said, her voice a fragile reed. "The world is so dangerous lately. We decided it was best if we all stayed together, for safety." David stepped forward, his hand outstretched. "Give me your keys, Maya, and your phone. There's been a security breach in the neighborhood. I've updated the house system. Until the threat is neutralized, no one leaves the estate." Maya looked at him, seeing the monster behind the mask of the numbered man. "What threat, David? The threat of me finding out who Chloe Vance is?" The silence that followed was heavy, thick with the scent of the lilies Jennifer kept in every room. David's face didn't change, but his eyes turned into cold, gray stones. "You've been digging in the dirt, Maya," David said softly. "And when you dig in the dirt, you get your hands dirty. We can't have that. Go to your room. We'll discuss this when you've calmed down." Maya tried to push past him, but David's hand clamped onto her arm like a steel vise. He didn't hurt her, not yet. But the sheer strength of his grip told her that the loving father was gone. She was led upstairs, the janitor jingle of the house's new electronic locks clicking shut behind her. Her car keys were gone. The landline in her room had been severed, the cord dangling like a dead snake. She was a prisoner in her own home. Hours passed in a blur of panic and calculated silence. Maya sat on her bed, her thumb raw from rubbing the sea glass. She needed to get out. She needed to reach the perimeter. If she could get to the main road, she could flag someone down. She waited until the house fell into a heavy, artificial quiet. She slipped out of her shoes and crept toward the back stairs. The air smelled of floor wax and Jennifer's cloying lilies. She made it to the kitchen, then out the mudroom door. The night air was freezing, the dampness seeping into her socks. She ran toward the edge of the property, her heart pounding. The woods were a wall of black, but she knew the path to the gate. A flashlight beam cut through the dark, blinding her. "Going somewhere, Miss Sterling?" The voice was like gravel. James Henderson stepped out from behind a massive oak tree. He was a thick-necked man, his arms crossed over his chest. He was David's neighbor, the man who lived in the cottage at the edge of the estate. "Mr. Henderson," Maya gasped, squinting against the light. I need to go to the store. My father, he locked the gates." "Your father is a very smart man," Henderson said. He began to crack his knuckles, pop, pop, pop. "He knows what's best for you. Now let's go back inside. It's too cold for a stroll." He reached out, his hand grabbing her shoulder. His grip was rough, lacking the clinical precision of David's. Maya felt a surge of pure, white-hot rage. She wasn't a child. She wasn't a prize to be guarded. Her hand went to her pocket, but instead of the sea glass, she felt the small canister of spray paint she'd taken from the mudroom. It was neon orange, meant for marking trees. As Henderson leaned in to pull her toward the house, Maya pulled the canister and sprayed. A cloud of acrid orange mist exploded into Henderson's face. He let out a strangled roar, his hands flying to his eyes. "You little bitch!" Maya didn't wait to hear the rest. She turned and bolted, not toward the gate, but back toward the house. Henderson was between her and the road, and the woods were too thick to navigate in the dark. Her only hope was David's study. If she could find the evidence she needed, something more than just a blood type, she might have a chance. She scrambled back through the mudroom, locking the door behind her. She could hear Henderson's muffled shouts from the yard, the sound of his heavy boots thudding against the porch. She made it to the study, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The room was a temple to David's obsession with order. 47 white shirts, numbered and filed. Books arranged by height and color. She went to the floor-to-ceiling mahogany bookshelf. She remembered seeing David move a specific volume, a thick, dusty leather tome on Victorian architecture, whenever he thought she wasn't looking. She pulled the book. It didn't come off the shelf. Instead, a section of the wall clicked open, revealing a small, recessed safe. Maya didn't have the code, but she didn't need it. The numbered man was a creature of habit. She tried the sequence of his favorite shirt, 0404. The safe door swung open. Inside was a stack of yellowed envelopes. Maya pulled them out, her fingers trembling. They were addressed to David Sterling, but the return address was a P.O. box in Chicago. She opened the first one. "David," the letter began, the handwriting shaky and desperate. "I know you have her. I saw the car. I saw the way she looked at the park. Please, just let me see her once. I won't tell the police. I just need to know she's okay. Robert Vance." Maya's breath hitched. Robert Vance, her biological father. He had found them. He had known all along. She flipped through the letters. They spanned years. Pleas turned into demands, then into broken, sobbing apologies. And then, the tone changed. The final letter wasn't from Robert. It was a copy of a police report and a note in David's handwriting. Robert's accident with the pills was very convenient. The witness has been paid. The Vance file is closed. Asterisk. Maya felt a wave of nausea so strong she had to lean against the desk to keep from collapsing. David hadn't just stolen her. He had systematically destroyed the man who tried to save her. He had used Robert's struggle with addiction, a struggle born from the grief of losing his daughter, to blackmail him into silence, and then, perhaps, into the grave. "Do you like what you found, Maya?" The voice was soft, coming from the doorway. David was standing there, his arms crossed. He didn't look angry. He looked disappointed the way a scientist might look at a failed experiment. "You killed him," Maya whispered, holding the letters like a weapon. "You stole me, and then you killed my father." "I saved you," David said, stepping into the room. The Vances were a disaster, a house full of shadows and apologies. "I gave you a legacy. I gave you a name that means something." He reached for the intercom on his desk and pressed a button. A high-pitched electronic whine filled the house, a sound so sharp it felt like a needle being driven into Maya's brain. "The system is fully engaged now, Maya." David's voice echoed through the speakers, though he was standing right in front of her. "The windows are reinforced steel. The doors are deadbolted from the central hub. You wanted to know the truth? Now you have it. And now you'll stay here until you learn to appreciate the life I've built for you." The house groaned as the heavy security shutters slid down over the windows, plunging the room into a velvet, artificial darkness. Maya was trapped in a fortress of her father's making, surrounded by the ghosts of the family he had erased. The darkness was absolute. The storm outside had finally broken, and the first crack of lightning illuminated the study in a jagged white flash. Then, the power died. The electronic whine of the security system cut out, replaced by a heavy, suffocating silence. The high-tech fortress was now just a dark, cold box. Maya felt a flicker of hope. If the power was out, the electronic locks might be vulnerable. She grabbed her flashlight from the desk and slipped out of the study. The house felt different in the dark. The smell of lilies was overwhelming, a funeral scent that seemed to coat the walls. She moved toward the stairs, the beam of her flashlight dancing across the family portraits. David, Jennifer, and Maya. A perfect, fabricated lie. She heard a sound from the hallway, a rhythmic scritch, scritch, scritch. She froze. It wasn't her thumb. It was the sound of someone walking on broken glass. She turned the flashlight toward the sound. David was standing at the end of the hall, his face a mask of sweating mania. In his hand, he held a long, thin needle, a sedative-filled syringe. "It's for your own good, Maya," he said, his voice cracking. "You're hysterical. You need to sleep. When you wake up, we'll start over. We'll go back to the sequence." "Stay away from me," Maya screamed. She backed away, but David lunged with a speed that defied his age. They collided in the narrow hallway, a violent scramble of limbs and heavy breathing. The syringe grazed Maya's arm, the cold liquid stinging her skin. She shoved him back with all her strength, her hand catching the edge of a glass display case that held Jennifer's collection of antique porcelain dolls. The case shattered, a cascade of glass shards raining down on the floor. David slipped on the glass, his feet sliding out from under him. Maya didn't wait. She bolted up the stairs, her heart hammering against her ribs. She could hear David's ragged shouts behind her, the sound of him struggling to find his footing in the dark. She reached the attic door and slammed it shut, sliding the heavy antique trunk across the floor to barricade the entrance. She was panting, her breath coming in short, sharp bursts. The attic was a graveyard of the sterling secrets. Dusty furniture, old clothes, and boxes labeled with dates that didn't match Maya's life. She moved toward the back of the room, her flashlight beam searching for a weapon, a way out. Anything. She saw a loose floorboard near the window. She pried it up, her fingers catching on a splinter. Inside was a small, black burner phone. She turned it on, the screen's blue light blinding in the dark. There were dozens of saved messages, all from a number she didn't recognize. October 1st, 1998. The mother is distracted. She blinks too much. It will be easy. October 5th, 1998. Followed them to the park. The girl likes the red swing. Jennifer is ready. October 14th, 1998. It's done. We have her. The Vances are calling the police. Move to the Portland house immediately. The messages weren't from David. They were to Jennifer. Maya felt the world tilt. Jennifer wasn't a passive participant. She wasn't a victim of David's control. She was the architect. She had stalked the Vances for weeks, choosing Chloe like a piece of fruit at a market. She scrolled further down, her thumb shaking. June 12th, 2023. The girl is digging. She found the library records. What's the play? Reply from David. Hire the fixer. If she finds the truth, she's a liability. Eliminate the connection. We can't lose the legacy. Subverted beat 3.5. Maya stared at the small screen, the blue light reflecting in her wide, horrified eyes. She had expected to find proof of her kidnapping, a trail of breadcrumbs that would lead her back to her real family. She had imagined a world where she was the lost princess, a precious thing that had been stolen and was now being fought over. She thought that once she revealed the truth, her parents would crumble, their love revealed as a twisted but genuine obsession to keep her. She felt a strange, hollow sense of relief as she read the words, "Eliminate the connection." For a split second, she thought it meant David was going to pay someone to hide the records again, to eliminate the paper trail. She began to breathe easier, her shoulders dropping. They still wanted her. They were monsters, yes, but she was their miracle. They would do anything to keep her. She wasn't alone in the world. Then she scrolled to the next message. Fixer. Target identified. Maya Sterling, requesting confirmation on the final disposal protocol. You sure about this? She's your daughter. Asterisk, David. She isn't a daughter. She's evidence of a crime that carries a life sentence. Do it quietly. Make it look like a suicide from the stress of her identity crisis. We'll mourn. We'll be the grieving parents. The legacy stays intact. The relief vanished, replaced by a cold, crushing weight that felt like a physical blow to her chest. Her knees gave out, and she slumped against the dusty attic floor, the burner phone slipping from her numb fingers. She wasn't a prize. She wasn't a miracle. She was a liability. The 24 years of happy birthday songs, the cookies, the numbered shirts, the protection. It wasn't about her. It was about the crime. She was a piece of stolen property that had become too expensive to keep. The people she had called mother and father weren't just kidnappers. They were her executioners. She looked at the heavy wooden door, the trunk she'd used as a barricade. It felt pathetic now, a toy shield against a pair of wolves. Her entire life had been a curated prison, And now that she had looked through the bars, they were simply going to burn the prison down with her inside. She was more alone in this moment than she had ever been, a girl with no name, no past, and a future that was being measured in the minutes it would take for a hired killer to find her. The sound of a heavy thud against the attic window made her scream. She turned, her flashlight beam catching a pair of gloved hands gripping the edge of the trellis outside. The fixer, the man from the office, was climbing toward the window. Behind her, the attic door shuddered. Thwack. The blade of an emergency axe bit through the wood of the door. Another thud, and a sliver of light from the hallway spilled into the room. "Maya," David's voice called out, calm and terrifying. "Don't make this harder than it has to be. The sequence is broken. We have to reset." Maya looked at the room, her designer's eye catching the layout of the rafters, the way the service pulley for the old luggage lift hung from the central beam. She remembered the blueprints she'd seen in David's safe. The hidden compartment in the attic wasn't just for phones. It was a structural bypass. She grabbed a heavy drafting T-square from a nearby table and jammed it into the gap where the axe had broken through, wedging it against the doorframe. It wouldn't hold for long, but it would buy her seconds. She lunged for the service pulley, the cold metal of the chain biting into her palms. The fixer's head appeared at the window, his eyes cold and focused. "Sorry, kid," he grunted, reaching for his belt. Maya didn't wait. She kicked off the rafters, swinging out over the open foyer as the attic door finally gave way. She was a blur of movement in the dark, a shadow swinging through the center of the house she had once called home. As she reached the apex of the swing, she let go, her body slamming into the fixer just as he stepped onto the balcony. They tumbled together, a chaotic mess of limbs and shouting. The fixer hit the railing, his weight carrying him over the edge. He fell with a sickening thud onto the marble floor of the foyer, 40 feet below. Maya scrambled to her feet, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She didn't look down. She ran for the mudroom, the orange spray paint still staining her hands. She burst out into the storm, the rain washing the scent of lilies from her skin. She didn't go for the gates. She knew the woods. She knew the path that Robert Vance must have taken all those years ago. She ran until her lungs burned, until the sound of David's shouts faded into the roar of the wind. She reached the main road just as the blue and red lights of a dozen police cars crested the hill. Mark was in the lead car, his heavy ring of keys jingling as he jumped out before the vehicle had even stopped. "Maya," he shouted, throwing his jacket around her shivering shoulders. "I got the message. I got the GPS pin. Are you okay?" Maya looked back at the Sterling estate, the dark, Gothic silhouette of the house standing like a tomb against the stormy sky. "The math finally squares, Mark," she whispered. 4 weeks later, the air in Chicago was crisp, smelling of lake water and exhaust. Chloe, sat in a small, nondescript diner on the south side. Across from her sat a woman with sharp, bobbed hair and fingers wrapped in beige Band-Aids. Amy Wilson looked at Chloe, her eyes searching for a ghost. "You have her eyes," Amy said, her voice like gravel. "Sarah's eyes. She never stopped looking, you know? Even when the police gave up. Even when the world told her she was crazy. She kept a candle in the window every single night for 25 years. "I found the letters," Chloe said, her voice steady. "David killed Robert. He destroyed everything." "He tried," Amy said, reaching out to touch Chloe's hand, a brief, stiff gesture of comfort. "But he didn't win. You're here. You're the truth he couldn't bury." Chloe looked out the window at the bustling city. David and Jennifer were in separate holding cells, facing a litany of charges that would ensure they never saw the sun again. The Sterling legacy was a pile of ash. She stood at the edge of a quiet cemetery later that afternoon. The wind whistled through the headstones, a lonely, haunting sound. She found the grave of Sarah Vance. The stone was simple, the grass around it gray and dead, as if the earth itself was mourning. Chloe placed a single, jagged piece of sea glass on the granite. It was the only thing she had left from her old life, the sharp edge that had kept her grounded when the world was a lie. "I'm home, Mom," she whispered. She didn't have a happily ever after. She had a mountain of trauma, a name she barely recognized, and a future that felt as uncertain as the Oregon mist. But as she walked away from the grave, her thumb didn't reach for her pocket. The scritch was gone. For the first time in 24 years, Chloe Vance was breathing the truth. And that was enough.